It's TK Friday, and today on The Joy of Editing, I'll be doing another deep dive, this time into the color grading tool, one of my favorite tools in the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, and welcome to The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. It is TK Friday, and today it's a deep dive into one of my favorite tools in the TK9 plugin for Photoshop, and that is the color grading tool. I have created some notes for you so you can download these PDF notes. You'll find them in the description below this video. There'll be a Dropbox link, so grab the notes. Now, what exactly is color grading in photography? Color grading in photography refers to the creative and intentional adjustment of colors in an image to achieve a specific look or mood. It goes beyond simple color correction, which makes your images look exactly like they appear in real life. Color grading allows photographers to infuse their work with a unique and personalized visual style. Color grading is about creating a color tone for your image, for example, giving it a reddish or bluish hue. It's used in photography and in filmmaking to change the mood or enhance a feeling the photographer is trying to portray. It's also used to make an image more aesthetic by choosing a harmonious color scheme and applying this to your image. Well, that's color grading, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really easy to do using the color grading tool here inside of the TK9 plugin for Photoshop. Let's go ahead and dive right in. And by the way, if you don't yet own the TK9 plugin for Photoshop, you can save 15% off the TK9 plugin for Photoshop along with training videos. Use my promo code DK15. That gets you 15% off of everything. Not only are you saving money, but you're supporting the joy of editing with Dave Kelly when you use that promo code DK15. Thank you all for using my promo code. I really appreciate it. Where do we find the color grading tool? This is the TK9 multi-mask panel, and you'll find the color grading tool right here. When you click on it, you will apply a color grading tool. Now notice my properties panel is set to open up right next to my multi-mask panel, and you'll notice that a curves adjustment layer opened up. Now, I just want to say this about the color grading tool. The color grading tool works with the curves adjustment layer, only it controls it. But it controls it in ways that would be difficult or impossible without the color wheel interface. That is right here, this color wheel. Let's start out by looking at these buttons across the top here. Now the plus, if you already have a color grading layer down, if you click the plus, you'll notice you'll add another one. And of course, you can keep clicking this plus and add more color grading tools if you need them. Now, for now, we're just going to start out with one color grading tool. So I'm on the top color grading layer. I'll click the trash can on my combo panel and delete that. I'll click it one more time and delete that one. So now we have just this one color grading layer. But notice it is a curves adjustment layer. You can see it right there. Now, your TK9 plugin for Photoshop may be set up differently than mine, and that deals with workspaces. You can set your Photoshop workspaces up any way you want. This is the way I like to have my TK9 plugin for Photoshop set up, by the way. So yours may look different. Bear that in mind. Now let me say something that is very important. When you're working with a color grading tool, never come over to the curves and make an adjustment, because if you do, you'll throw things off and the color grading tool will not be able to sync back up with it. So never touch the curves adjustment itself. Always work from the color grading tool when you're using a color grading tool. Now, if you're just using a curves adjustment, feel free to adjust anything you want, but never alter this when you're using the color grading tool. Now let's turn our attention to these buttons, the black, gray, and white. These are for the different tonal ranges we can work in: shadows, midtones, and highlights. Let's start out by clicking on the midtone button. Now notice my cursor hovering over the color wheel. The tip of the cursor, the point, wherever you see that point and you click, you will drop down a color grade in the midtones in this case. So let me click right here. See how the image has warmed up? And it's only warmed up in the midtones. So let me shut this layer off by clicking the eye. Here's before and here's after. By the way, you notice the image probably got a little bit brighter. If we change the blend mode to color, notice how it has not gotten brighter now. So if you want to color grade and you don't want to have shifts in brightness, go and use the color blend mode. So you can use blend modes along with the color grading tool. Now I'm going to go back and switch this to normal, and notice how it'll light up a little bit. You see that it gets a little bit lighter, and that may be something you want. But you also have this brightness slider here. I can also take this slider and drag it to the left a little bit and darken up those midtones. Now you don't have to click and drag. You can also just click anywhere inside this slider and you will move that slider to the position you click to. You see that? See how it's moving around when I'm just clicking here? So that is a really fast way. Instead of dragging, just click and drop that slider where you want it. Now let me click on the shadow button, and now let's color grade the shadows. Let's say I want my shadows to go cooler. So this is the cool area right down in here. Blues and so on right in this area. So let me click right here. And now I'm adding some blue color grade into the shadow areas. Now, of course, I can take the brightness slider and darken up my shadows a little bit as well. But now I've added some blue color grade to the shadows. And now let's click on highlights. And again, do I want green in my highlights? Probably not. Do I want yellow in my highlights? Maybe. And maybe that's too much. So if you come in this way, you'll have less color in those highlights. It'll be less saturated, like right there. Now here's a note that I want to point out. The key to color grading is to experiment. Try things out and see what happens. So right now my highlights are here. What if I come down and give them some magenta? You see how things have changed? Now, I don't like what's happening on the bird, but maybe I like what's happening on the background here. And by the way, you see the edge of the color wheel? You don't have to click like right here. You can be a little bit outside that edge and it will drop it to the maximum amount of that particular color grade. See right there? So if I click outside of the wheel a little bit, not too much, but out in here, I'll get the maximum effect. But let's say I want to give it like this much magenta right here. Now let me shut off this layer. Here's before and here's after, but you see how the mood of this image is changing? I'm not saying it's great or anything. I'm just showing you what you can do. Now I know it looks horrible on the bird, but I do like what's happening on the background, and I'll take care of that in a sec. But I want you to look at this curves adjustment up here. Look how crazy that looks, right? But that was easy to do with the color wheel along with the brightness slider. That would be really hard to do by coming into the different channels here and moving things around. It's all done for you just by clicking on this color wheel. And also with the brightness slider if you need to adjust that for either the shadows, midtones, or highlights, depending on which one you're using. Now you'll notice the green outline around white. That is because I'm working with highlights right now. And also notice, see the circles here? These are called pucks. And whenever you have an active puck, you can see a little square around it. So you'll see a green outline around the tone you're targeting, like in this case, highlights. And you can also see that there's a square around my color grading puck, which in this case is the highlight puck. Highlights are active, so I can click and drop another point anywhere I choose. Let me say I want to warm that up a little bit. Let's keep it in magenta. I kind of like that. Now, let me shut off the color grading layer. I'll just click the eyeball. There's before and there's after. Now, let's say I like it, and I do kind of like it, but we could always come back here later and alter this any way you want. But I just want to show you, this is the power of the color grading tool. You can color grade these images any way you choose. Remember, you are the artist. You have an artist license. You can do anything you want to your images. It's totally up to you. I like the background, but I don't like what's happening to the bird. We can take care of that. Now we could come to the combo or CX panel and click this button to select the subject. And now our subject is selected. Now what we can do next is invert that because I want to protect that bird. So let's click this button right here. When you click this button, you will invert your selection. And now what I can do is come and click on my mask calculator. I love the mask calculator. Click on active selection. Click this button to apply, and now you'll notice the bird is not getting the effect. Now you can see the marching ants because I have a selection. Just click this button right here to get rid of the selection, and the marching ants go away. So now let me shut this off. Here's the before and here's the after. Now what if I want to color grade the bird differently? Well, here's what I can do. Come up to the color grading tool, click the plus button to add another color grading tool. And now I just want to center on the bird. Now what I can do is, see this mask right here, hold your Option or Alt key down and drag this up, and it'll put that same mask on here, but it's the opposite of what I want. So come to your combo or CX panel and click this button in green. This is to invert a pixel layer. This is a pixel layer, this mask, so we'll click this. And now it's only going to affect the bird. Pretty cool. Now let's give this wise old owl some color grading. I'm on this layer. Here's my color grading tool. Let's start out with midtone. So I'll click on the midtone button and let's warm him up a little bit. So I'm going to drag my cursor right over this area right here and give it a click. See how that warms him up a little bit? And now if I want to, I could take this brightness slider and let's drag it to the left a little bit just to give him a little bit more contrast so he's really standing out, and I like that. And you know what? That's all I want to do for the owl. Let's click our before after button on the combo panel. Here's before and here's after. See how we altered the flavor of this image with a color grade. And again, I'm not saying this is the perfect color grade. I'm just giving you possibilities. It's up to you to go and play with this color grading tool, okay? That is your job, and it is a fun job at that. Now, if you look at my properties panel, you'll notice I'm selecting the mask. That's why we don't see the curves adjustment. So let me click on this button, and now you can see there is my curves adjustment that I've applied to the owl. Now here's something to always remember when working with the color grade tool. Don't forget you have the opacity slider for the layer. If the color grading effect is too strong, you can always pull back on that opacity. Let's click on the first color grading layer, which represents the background. Now let's say I thought that was too strong. I could take this opacity and start to pull it back a little bit. You see that? Maybe I won't have it quite as strong. Don't forget that. That is very important. And also, don't forget about blend modes. Blend modes can be very useful when working with color grading. For instance, this background, what if I wanted to pop it a little bit, add a little bit more contrast and color? Well, I could try a blend mode like soft light. So let me click on the soft light button on the TK9 combo panel. And you see how things have changed there. And I could try overlay. It'll get more contrasty, more color pop. Let me try the linear light blend mode. Now, let me say something about the linear light blend mode. It is set up for you by TK9 to always give you a 15% fill, which is a great starting point. Now, if you come to your regular blend modes and you choose linear light, it's going to have 100% fill and 100% opacity, and it's going to look horrible, and you're going to say, who in the world would ever want to use that? But the key to the linear light blend mode is to have that fill set at 15%, and the TK9 plugin for Photoshop sets you up for that. Should you always keep it at 15% for fill? No, you could change it, but it's a great starting point. Now let me talk to you a little bit about presets, and that's this button right here. Let's say you come up with a color grade that you like to apply to all your landscape images. It's your signature look. You could save it out as a preset. So let's say right now I'm on the color grading layer that deals with the background of this image, and let's say I like this and I want to keep this. I can save it as a preset, and then I'll be able to apply it to other images in the future, if I so desire. To save out a preset, here's what you need to do. Make sure you're on the proper color grading layer that you want to save. In this case, I'm on this background area. This is what this color grade is affecting, and I want to save it as a preset. Now, before I save this, let me tell you what gets saved in your preset, and this is important, and this is really great. It will save your layer opacity. Wherever your layer opacity is set to, it'll save that. It'll save the color grade, obviously, that you're using. It will save wherever the slider for the brightness is set to. It'll save that position. It will also save a blend mode. So 4 things it does. Saves layer opacity, color grade, blend modes, and brightness adjustments, all in that preset. Also note for the opacity, it's the opacity of the layer as well as the fill opacity. Again, make sure you're on the proper color grading layer that you want to save out as a preset. Come up to the multi-mask panel on the color grading tool and click on this button right here. It opens up your presets. Click the plus to save a preset, and let's give it a name. And I'm just going to call this one Test, because I'll probably get rid of this and I'll show you how to delete a preset in a little bit here. But let's click OK. Now, by the way, to get out of the color grading presets, click this X and it closes it. Now, here we are in this layer. Let me go ahead and reset it. Okay, so now there's no color grading on it whatsoever. So if I shut this layer off, you can see there's no change on that color grading layer. And now, here's how we can apply that preset. Come back and click on Presets, and let's click on Test. And there it is. And notice something. There's the opacity at 80%, the fill at 15%, linear light blend mode. And if I X out of here, you can see there's my color grade right there. So isn't that cool? So you can save out presets. How nice is that? Now, also the brightness slider adjustments are saved. If I click on shadows, you can see where that slider is. See, it's saved. If I click on midtones, you can see that position. And if I click on highlights, you can see that position. So all that gets saved out in your preset. How can you delete a preset you no longer want? Well, you just have to come up and click on the preset button again. Select the preset you want to get rid of. This one right here. I'll get rid of that one. Make it active and click the minus button. And this message comes up. Are you sure you want to do this? Click yes, and it's gone. And now this test, I don't want to really keep it, so I'll click on test to make it active. Click the minus button. Again, are you sure you want to delete this? Yes. And now test is gone. I'm going to get into working with presets in a little bit, but let me X out of here for now. Now, briefly, let me talk about backing up your presets. Say you made a bunch of presets for your color grading tool, and say you also have edit blend if presets. What we can do is, and it doesn't matter if this color grading tool is open, let me just click X. Nothing changes anywhere. But just come to the multi-mask panel here, click on the flyout menu, and come down and click on backup user data. Your file browser will open up, and then you could point it to where you want to save out your backup file in case something would happen to your files for TK9, all your presets and so on. And let's say that did happen, you lost all your files. Come back to the multi-mask panel and click on the flyout menu, and then come down and click on restore user data. Your file browser will open, and then just point it to where you're keeping your TK backup files and go ahead and restore the files. I went ahead and loaded up another image. By the way, these are all Adobe stock images I'm working with today. And let's say on this one, I just want to warm it up a little bit, but I want to show you some more color grading basics here. So let's add a color grading tool by clicking this button on the multi-mask panel to give us a color grading tool. And let's start out with midtone. So I'll click the midtone button, and you can see it's selected by the little green square around it. And note that the color grading puck is right in the dead center of the color wheel, meaning there is no color grading whatsoever. So if I wanted to warm this up, I could hover over in these red tones right over here and click, and you can see it warms it up. And say I like that. Now, maybe I want to decrease the brightness of the midtones. So I'll take the brightness slider and drag it to the left a little bit, decreasing it. But then let's say, you know what? I want to reset this entire color grading tool. Well, that's what this button is for. When you click it, it'll reset all of your pucks, whether you had things adjusted in shadows, highlights, and midtones. They'll all get reset when you click this button, as well as any of the brightness sliders. So let me click this, and you'll notice it gets reset. So that's kind of important to know that. That's one way of resetting. Now let me show you some more reset options. So let's say, for instance, I'll click on the midtone button again, and let's just warm up those midtones. And I'll take this slider, and instead of dragging it this time, I'm just going to click right here and set that brightness level to right there. And let's say I like that. But then at the end of the day, I said, you know what? It's way too dark. I just want to reset the brightness slider for the midtones. If you hover anywhere inside of this slider and right click, you will just reset that slider, and you'll notice I'm in midtones. And that holds true for shadows, midtones, or highlights. But let me go ahead and darken that again. And let's say I like that there. This time I'm going to go on and click the shadow button. And let's say I want to cool down the shadow. So I'm going to hover my cursor right around here and click. And you can see my shadows got cooler. Maybe I want to darken them up a bit. So I'm going to click right here and just darken up the shadows. And I think that looks good. Now let's say I want to warm up the highlights. So let me come up and click on the highlight button and maybe come around this area right here. Click to drop that highlight puck right there. And then I might say, you know what? I want to lighten it up a little bit. So let me come right about here. And I say, it's okay, but it's way too yellow now in the highlights. What if I want to reset just the highlights? In other words, the brightness slider as well as the color grading puck. And you already know if I right click on the brightness slider, it'll go back to the center with no brightness adjustment. But I can choose any one of these tonal range buttons up here, shadows, midtones, or highlights. And right now I'm on highlight. If I right click on this, it will reset the puck back to the center as well as the brightness slider in effect, I'm not using any highlights on this, and that looks good. So let me click. Here's the before and here's the after. So that is a pretty nice color grade. And don't forget, we always have this opacity we can pull back if it's too strong, and maybe right there. So here is the before and here's the after. And I do like the color grade in there. And sometimes a very subtle color grade is really all you need. Sometimes you want to be more dramatic, but sometimes you want to be more subtle. This video is taking a lot longer than I thought it would take. At the beginning, I thought I could cover all this in one video, but we're already over 20 minutes, and I don't want to overwhelm you. So I'm going to come back next week. But let me tell you some of the things we'll be going over. How to work with layer masks, with color grading, luminosity zone, and color and blend if. How to copy a color grade from one image and transfer it over to another. How we can make our own black and white split toning presets, which are really great if you're into black and white photography. How we can work with complementary colors when using color grading. I'll talk about hex codes, and also how to select colors from the image you're working on to help you with your color grading. There's a lot of things I still need to cover, but that's going to be next week. It'll be part 2 of my color grading tool deep dive, so a lot more to cover. You don't want to miss it. Tune in next week for part 2. Well, there it is, everyone. This was part 1 of my deep dive into the color grading tool. Next week, part 2. Hey, if you enjoyed today's tutorial, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe. Click that bell notification icon. Click all so that you'll receive all notifications. And then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll get notified about it. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly, and I will see you all right here next time. But until then, happy editing.